Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to this inaugural event of the first International Maritime Human Rights Conference. I'm genuinely very pleased and proud to be able to stand here in front of you and to work with so many distinguished speakers and indeed delegates. This first conference has been titled Respect, Responsibility and Remedy in the Maritime Environment. And I hope that it's the start of something new. Not a new subject, but in terms of a new injection of commercial vigour, attention to detail in relation to abuses of human rights on the seas, and indeed looking at human rights in all of its guises and the sectors that it applies to, which are all sectors across the maritime supply chain, and without which we don't have the safeguards of what are fundamental rights. We must make this a priority, and that is certainly against a background currently in the shipping industry where there is reported crisis, the effects of the Hanjin shipping collapse, an increase in criminalisation of seafarers, as well as increasing reports of the abandonment of seafarers. And that is before we even start looking at issues in the global fisheries sector and industry, and indeed with the global migrant and refugee crisis. When I talk about human rights at sea, I talk about the umbrella that covers the entire maritime environment. I believe personally and professionally that a simple thank you is often the most powerful acknowledgement that you can make when people have done their best for you. I'd therefore like to extend my sincere thanks indeed to firstly, all of you as the delegates for giving up your time to come and listen to us. You are the audience, and I am delighted that you have decided to attend today because it's a positive action to come to something like this. And there's a bit of risk as well when you're coming to an event for the first time. I'd also like to thank the organisers and their support teams at Petrospot and Genius Consulting who have worked tirelessly. And they may or may not tell you, but I'll tell you, it's been a very tough sell for them. And they've worked very hard, mainly because of arguably the toxicity that exists around the words human rights. So my sincere thanks to the team. I'd like to thank the advisory board, but I'd also like to thank our sponsors, National Federation of Fisheries organisations, Sailor Society with their By Sea coffee brand here. Please, there's lots of free samples, and we do love free samples, but do buy afterwards, and Ship Money. And the reason I mention it is not just because they're sponsors, because it's these people who stepped up to the mark to make today happen. I'd also like to welcome the accredited media, who represent, we hope, all sections of the media who have been invited, and with whom, in many respects, the success, or otherwise, of today may well rest. But don't judge us on the first pieces. As you'll have seen from the programme, it's tightly packed. We could have easily gone to 2 days on this, but we have got 9.5 hours to get through some 20 speakers, all covering topics that are key and critical to them. I therefore ask all delegates to be mindful of the timings, and particularly with the walk backwards and forwards, and also for speakers as best they can to stick rigidly to the programme. Chairs, I would ask you to do the same. So the scope of this conference, well, again, I'm not going to reiterate what is already in the programme, but if you look at the programme, you'll look at just some of the subject areas that have been brought to the forefront under the umbrella of human rights at sea. And we welcome speakers and delegates from around the world, from the States, from New Zealand, and from Africa. Questions, you're strongly advised to ask questions. This is your opportunity, but I'd ask for objective challenges and respectful questioning, please, to all speakers and panellists. But this is your opportunity to expose the issues that are important also to you. There's also a film team here, the gathering gown, and a photographer. There may be some flash photography. The film team here is also going to be interviewing people. So if you have something that is pertinent to say, Lou, if Lou could just raise a hand, please make yourself known to Lou, and we have a separate room. It's really important when we have conferences, we go to lots of conferences and then everybody bomb bursts and we lose the ability to gather in what we have discussed. That's not going to happen on this occasion. We're going to capture it on the films, we're going to capture it with articles afterwards, but the film is really important in today's multimedia society. We will finish with closing remarks around about 17:45 and then straight into a networking evening. This is all important because it's where we deconstruct the day. And to be honest, I think by then, after 9.5 hours, we will have certainly deserved it. So the background to this conference. It may surprise you to know that this conference was conceived under a mango tree in Mali in September, October of last year. I was working at the time as the head humanitarian and human rights lawyer and indeed advisor to the European Union in Mali. And I spoke to Jean Gowen at Genius Consulting and said, I've got this idea, what do you think? So we are here today. And I'm really proud to see as many people today coming to listen, because when we started this, there was, I believe, 22 people at the launch of the charity. Our charity, amongst many of the other partners here, is not about extended discussions or multiple layering of committees or steep pyramidal management structures. We are about accuracy, speed, and delivery. And we're going to talk about delivery today because when we look at civil society and the soft law approach, as opposed to the hard law legislative approaches for abuses, it is this delivery of providing new publications and innovative projects that I believe drives the legislation and also drives the governments and policymakers. In a recent poll on Twitter, over 5 days of over 1,700 votes cast, 77% said that human rights should be safeguarded at sea. My concern was what the other 23% said. Now, why did they not agree? Possible explanations: they don't care, they're not educated in the issue, they have little awareness about what human rights are, or a bias towards what human rights is. The perceptions and the toxicity and the brand toxicity goes with human rights charities, some of which take a more vigilante approach. Or actually, it's a combination of the four. So today is about trying to dispel those myths. Would it again surprise you that factually in 2013, when I first started looking at this, that if you had looked on the World Wide Web or typed in the words human rights at sea, those 4 words, that there was no international advocacy platform. There were a couple of articles in relation to academia, and there was nothing in substantial form across the web. Today, and don't take my word for it, type those 4 words in to any search engine and look where we are today. Human rights at sea, I want to see in the lexicon as common customary language. And what people do with their interpretations of human rights at sea is up to them. But what we are seeing is a development of this lexicon of human rights at sea. And I'll stand here and look at everybody in the eye and tell you I'm unashamedly proud of the team, of the charity, of our partners who we work very closely with, and those who have supported us from the outset and taken risk in order to get us to here today. At the end of this month, I speak at the European Maritime Law Organisation's annual conference. Not an insignificant organisation. I'm introducing human rights at sea to NATO at their conference in Finland next month, the annual CSR conference in London, and the 19th Crew Conference. All want to know and discuss human rights at sea. We note that the Jean Monnet Centre of Excellence now have a module for human rights at sea. We note that the EU Law of the Sea School now has a module on human rights at sea. And this is a real change from when I first brought the idea to the forefront in 2013 and 2014, when a very senior shipping sector executive told me that human rights weren't really that important and they would only be looked at if their membership asked them to be looked at. Today, we can't be reactive in today's society, and in the current climate, it's not an option to avoid this topic. Now, as I come to the end of these opening remarks, I just want to take a very small opportunity to clarify matters in relation to human rights at sea, to the charity, and how we work, for the record. So human rights at sea works because of a number of basic rules. We work with people who believe in our founding principle that human rights apply at sea as equally as they do on land. We aim never knowingly to replicate any other organisation's work, and instead we aim to be original and innovative, and I'm going to highlight that later. And our door is always open for engagement from across industry, from across the entire maritime sector. But we do avoid protectionism, and we also avoid those entities that ring-fence and protect their own interests at the expense of what we say is the frontline people, the fishers and the seafarers. And for those who do not know, I established human rights at sea with my life savings. I bore the risk personally and against a background of very difficult financial conditions, and included not working and taking a salary for a year to establish this organisation because I believe in what we're doing. So if you're ever asked if I am serious about making this work, need I say more? And I've yet to find anybody prepared to put their own personal funds to take such a financial risk, let alone explain as much to their wife. So today, I welcome you to this inaugural event. Enjoy the programme, it's fascinating. We've already got our first speakers lined up. I will open in a moment. But please leave no stone unturned. As to a call for action, let me suggest this from the outset. Application of human rights throughout the maritime environment at all times without exception. I'll say that again. Application of human rights throughout the maritime environment at all times without exception. If we can achieve that across commerce, business, civil society and government, we will have achieved something very significant. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is the opening remarks, and I believe that we will take questions at the end of the people who have spoken at each panel. What I'd like to now do is go on and move on to my own presentation and the importance of human rights in the maritime environment. I'm going to pull, as a barrister, I'm going to pull a little bit of law out and reference to a case, and this is the MV Saga case that some of you may be familiar with. But it's interesting to note that even back in 1999, the hugely respected Professor Treves was talking about considerations of humanity. Whilst not explicitly talking about human rights, the issue of humanity, as he says here, must apply in the law of the sea as they do in other areas of international law. When I talk about the maritime environment, I'm talking about that environment in which states, authorities, government agencies, business works, as well as individuals. And we'll come on to the business, the government, and the individual piece in a moment. But first, I want to show you a 3.5-minute film. This film was partially funded by our charity, and it's entitled The Dead Sea by the film team from 6IF, a young film team who have done an amazing job. This is not the full film, but I'm going to give you a health warning. The film itself is dealing with very tough issues of migrants coming through a Libyan detention centre. It is based on reality, and it's based on testimony. Why does it affect the shipping industry? Why does it affect us here today? Because actually, when you look at issues of lack of rule of law, pushing economic migrants north who are into working with or have to take advantage of criminal networks, and then across in the Mediterranean, where commercial vessels, where NGOs who are represented here today actually rescue at the front line, then what I want you to see is the reality of those people who are being picked up for seafarers, for ship owners, for ship managers, why courses about understanding for their crews the issues of mass humanitarian rescue are so important. It does come with a health warning. It is a tough video to watch, but if anybody says or asks you what Human Rights at Sea does, this is what we are involved in mostly, well, every day.
أنا ما أخلي جوز اشتراك يا كلب أنا ما أخلي جوز Back in your cage ألو لا أنا ما أخلي جوز Please ألو
think Gaddafi is still here to protect you, huh?
Please. Let me down. Please.
ورياض لعب ليبيا جديدة.
Please. Let me down. Please.
أحمد زيدو.
Please.
راهي لما ضربتي الشياطين راه عمرك ما تدخل هنايا. خمم على ديك المعوجة ديال امك.
Let me down. Please. Please, let me down.
Manuel.
Olu. Olu, are you okay?
I'm fine.
Are you okay? Come,
Yes,
come,
yes.
please. Come. Olu, come. What's going on? Olu, come. Olu, move now, move. Leave her. Leave her. Olu, leave her. Hey, please. Leave her.
تعال يا أحمد.
Leave her. Olu.
اجي هنا.
Please leave her. Olu, please.
مدي.
Please, I beg you, leave her. Leave her, please. Okay, I will go. Please. Hey, please.
Pronto, mi senti? Abbiamo ricevuto un SOS da una nave libica, con 100 persone a bordo. Questa è la Guardia Costiera italiana. È stata segnalata appena fuori dalle acque territoriali italiane.
I'm not going to talk in any detail about the law, but as we go through and we look at what's coming up on the screen, the legal landscape is very robust, but it can be better. We're going to hear about modern slavery, we're going to hear about state responsibility, but all of the law there is well-known law. But there is a huge amount of work still to be done. Our work there is simply to explicitly raise awareness and implementation and accountability of human rights provisions. And we work on the basis of transparency, clarity and accountability, as do many of our partners. And of all of those pictures there, from commercial vessels to fisheries, through to indigenous vessels, migrants, private security, rescue, to the inclusivity and gender piece, and to internships, is again what we cover, because we look at it as a holistic approach. The scale of the issue. Business. Business drives this issue of human rights, abuses of human rights at sea, because business employs the people. At the top end, we have outstanding firms, ship owners, managers, and fisheries organisations. At the bottom end, we don't, and that's where we have the majority of our issues. Flag and coastal states, I'm delighted that we have for flag states discuss matters today, but I say the good, bad and ugly, because those ship owners who do not see the benefit in looking after their people will go to the ugly end of the scale. Governments, self-interest versus positive engagement. As NGOs, as civil societies, we can move very quickly. We're fleet of foot and we don't get bogged down into conflicts of interest and self-interest. But governments also, we find, take note of what civil society says, and that's why it is important that you consider us. And as I say there, civil society, some say are the watchdogs, the consciousness and the drivers for changes in policy. It's a really tough sell to sell human rights at sea, because what I'm actually talking about is education, institutional generational change. Maritime welfare is hugely fundamentally important, but it's not just about what I call the first world of shipping. It's about the global fisheries community. We've spoken about refugees, migrants, internally displaced people, the support to other NGOs, and business continuity, corporate social responsibility and education throughout the entire supply chain, soft law developments and innovation driving that change, and as I've said at the start, the future common lexicon of human rights at sea, and whatever guises that comes in future. Our support to the maritime community alongside our partners is advocacy, investigations, data recording of missing seafarers and fishermen, case studies highlighting issues, the MV Seaman Guard Ohio case in particular, innovative publications and new projects, and as I say, working alongside key partners across industry. Missing seafarers and fishermen, this was conceived, delivered and funded in 4 months with the help of Seafarers UK, and is becoming start of a global database. It's already been cited anecdotally in legal cases in support of seafarers' families with people lost at sea. 176 cases, about 45 cases of fisheries, and we're investigating 5 shipping cases. But that's the tip of the iceberg, and I stand by that statement. The migrant crisis, we've seen the film. It's not going away. In 2014, I was told it was a passing trend. It's not. Our research in Africa, 6 months of field research in Central Africa, telling the stories. The issue of criminalisation of volunteer maritime rescuers, not just NGOs, but also seafarers and crews on board commercial vessels. So to avoid knowingly acting unlawfully in the rescue of at-sea operations. And this is the issue of stopping people being smuggled in illegally into countries. But we produced this document. What else have we done in support of the maritime industry? Deprivation of liberty at sea. The document in relation to the case study on the MV Seaman Guard Ohio. Gender at sea, LGBT plus at sea. Our annual report came out last week. E-learning in terms of diversity inclusivity. Managing traumatic stress with Professor Neil Greenberg. And also in relation to mass rescue. And the soft law approach, and what I say is the importance of human rights publications, is key. Business, guiding principles of business human rights. A lot of people haven't heard about these. 2011, one of the only unanimously covered and agreed sets of guidance from the UN. Protect, respect and remedy in the environment, maritime environment. Protect by governments, respect by business and remedy to abuses. We've produced the first publication for the maritime sector. It's the corporate issue of corporate responsibility and highlighting the commercial risks. Instead of paying lots of people lots of money, we give this away for free. We stated this, that human rights at sea apply at sea as equally as they do on land in 2013. Maersk in 2015 spoke about the respect for human rights, and we've watched Maersk's documentation increase in relation to non-financial reporting. And the UN Human Rights Council in 2015 highlighted that the requirement for global standards relating to business and human rights. The board, do you understand what the guiding principles are? Do you have the relevant expertise? Do you have the policy commitment to make it happen? And do you have the core principles and values? And 11 more indicators which we've given away for free. Clearly, I'm not a good barrister because I'm giving all my work away for free. But the point here is that we give it to people to take forward for themselves and develop for themselves. And finally, as we get to the end here, business enterprises are expected to respect internationally recognised human rights for all employees and other affected rights holders, even if companies operate in or employ individuals from states with poorly implemented human rights protections. So that umbrella of human rights, government level, state here, US Secretary of State with the Trafficking Persons Report, the First World of Shipping, the reward of seafarers here by ISWAN and the IMO for all of their work for lifetime achievement. But the issues of fisheries, where we get our fish from in the deep seas, in the southern oceans, down in the Atlantic, the migrant crisis that we've spoken about, shipbuilding abuses. We're all familiar with this picture. I have to say, the point of putting this picture up is not emotive, but actually is the tolerance level in relation to migrants is reducing daily. And people look at that picture now and aren't really affected. We need to be really careful when our threshold gets too high. Displaced people, the abuses when we look at between seafarers and armed guards, again, the MV Seaman Guard Ohio. Those guards left UK waters with seamen's books, but yet didn't receive their equal rights at the outset. And abandonment of seafarers, which is highly topical at the moment. Call to action, I'm going to reiterate, application of human rights throughout the maritime environment at all times and without exception. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time, and I am now going to pass you on without further ado to our second speaker,